When people think salads, they think a Caesar salad with like chicken with no spice in it. But there's so many options you can add. We do have to always think about our body instead of just seeing what we see on like Instagram or any social media account of like another nutritionist making and assume that the same thing works for us.
We have to consider the environment we live in. We have to consider the climate we live in. I do not follow nutritionists who do not live where I live.
How do you make your daughter understand in her terminology of what's good and bad?
Giving the child the knowledge and empowering them to make those nutritional decisions actually makes them a better adult.
So many people have messaged me to have guests who can talk about parenting, and this episode I think will help them a lot. Rajini, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you, Janani. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here because I know this is going to be a very interesting conversation. First thing I have to say though, every time I say your name, I'm just going to have a smile on my face because I'm a big fan of Superstar. So just letting you know, but
Wow.
We'll focus the conversation on you now.
Thank you for that intro. I don't think there's ever been a time where I've gone through life without that reference being made.
Really?
I didn't think it would come up today, but
I'm sorry. It's going to come up quite
wonderful.
A bit.
I like it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we'll focus on you now. So I'm pretty sure the people that have heard the few sentences you've said so far, they've heard your accent, so they know that you have some background in the UK. So let's get into that before we get into what you're doing in Toronto now.
Okay.
So let's take it back maybe about 10 years ago. I don't remember when you actually moved here. Can you give us a
2016.
2016, okay.
It's been about 8 to 9 years now.
Okay, so we'll take it back to when you were in UK. Who was Rajini in UK?
Oh, Lord.
The Basha moment. Okay, let's go back.
What, like professionally?
Just as a person, what's your story?
Well, I was born and raised there.
In the UK?
In the UK.
Okay.
My parents were born in Sri Lanka, but they lived, like mum and my grandparents moved when mum was about 14, somewhere around there. And dad moved when he was 17. So they were very, very young.
Okay.
And yeah, I've got all my family there. Left everyone behind.
Wow.
So my education is in psychology. I studied and worked as not a psychologist, but as a business psychologist.
Okay.
Did lay counselling, all of that. Obviously, there's a little bit of a media background as well.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
So I've heard that you're the first British-born Tamil TV and radio presenter. No pressure on me for that. So since you worked in British Tamil media, I just have to ask you this. So you worked there in British Tamil media, and you've also done a little bit of work here in the Canadian Tamil media, from what I know.
Yes.
What differences do you see?
Nothing.
And before I can even finish, I was going to ask how we can improve ourselves.
Oh, yes. We could talk about that for a decade and a half. Honestly, I started around 1998 in media.
Oh, okay.
Tamil media scene took me through university, paid for my education, literally. So did really well.
They paid you? Sorry.
Yes, I got paid. I did not work for free. Did
Well
really well,
done.
yes. Okay, nobody else is getting paid here. But that's the thing. I hear that, things haven't changed.
Yeah,
There's a lot of things that could be done. Even in terms of technology. It was... Technology today is like predating technology from my time. So there's a lot of catch up to do, I guess.
But I guess with that experience you've had in media for so long, like when it comes to, I would say, the younger generation being in media, what are some ways you think we can improve in like the way we present ourselves, for example, or the type of content we're putting out?
Authenticity. Especially being, obviously, Elam background, British, Tamil, that's how I identify.
Right.
I find it when people follow mass media instead of retaining either their British Tamil identity or their European Tamil identity or their Canadian Tamil identity with their Tamilness being from Elam instead of another part of the world or any other part of the world. Not to say that I'm not a fan of popular cinema or popular Tamil culture, but I just think, we've got so much to offer and we're just beginning.
That's That's nice and inspiring to hear. Any advice you would give to like the younger generation that's in media now that you have learned from your past experiences?
Definitely have a backup plan.
Okay. Did not see that coming.
As you've just said, people are not paying. Have a backup plan, but don't give up. Don't give up. Keep at it. I had a lot of resistance from my parents. Okay. They did not want me to do what I did. And now, especially when I was at the peak, I would be playing every single relative we had, look at my daughter's and all of that. I can relate. So it does pay. They will come round eventually, but do have a backup plan just in case, That's always useful. Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let's take it now to your move to Toronto. Mm-hmm. What inspired you to move to Toronto? And do you regret it?
Definitely don't regret it. I love living in Toronto.
Okay, we're glad.
It is a beautiful place. I can't say much for the food. No, I'm just joking.
We will get into that topic.
We'll get to that soon. I really do like living in Toronto. And we moved as church missionaries. We moved to serve in local churches.
So what's the story behind that? Did you fulfill the reason that you moved here in terms of, I think there's like a specific group that, like for Tamil church, for example, right? And is there a specific community like that in London? And like, no?
No, it's just churches in general, just Christian people in general. And we felt that we were being called to serve here. Okay. So we did. We continue to.
Okay, and the only reason I asked that is because I used to work with an organization called Miracle Family Care. Mm-hmm. So I've seen like that community that they have, and it's so beautiful to see the way they come together, not just for religious purposes, but also for giving back, like the humanitarian side of things. So, which is why I wanted to ask about that question. But so now that you've moved here, what's your focus here in terms of your career?
So now in Toronto, I teach cooking classes. A lot of people know me as Tamil food. So that's what I do. I also do interpretation work, which I absolutely love doing. Nice. So those are sort of the main things I do. And apart from that, I sit as a trustee and head of communications for a UK-based charity called Agal, where we provide free mental health services and domestic violence support across the world, actually, globally.
Okay, so before we get into your nutrition side of things, I want to get into why that transition happened. And from your story, I think one of the turning points of your life occurred when you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease.
Correct.
So just for people who don't know what exactly that is, can you give a brief about what exactly happened and how you got diagnosed, if you don't mind sharing
I'm just going to take it back a couple of more years before that. Okay. I got into food. I'm like Tamil food, okay? Mm-hmm. That's something that is bigger than me. I didn't expect it to be it. It started in England. It started when my daughter was born. And like most people from my generation, I didn't know how to cook when I got married. Okay. My mother-in-law very patiently taught me, and obviously I've sort of built on what the base that she gave me. So it is becoming apparent that made me sort of consider or be more serious about nutrition and food. But it is the autoimmune condition that I was diagnosed with in 2017. Mm-hmm. It was after I moved to Toronto, about 6 months in, very, very sudden. I was given medication which maybe they should have done something else before they gave me the medication. Don't really want to get into too much detail.
Yeah, that's fine.
But it's a condition called Hashimoto's. So it's an autoimmune condition where my immune system attacks my thyroid gland. Okay. So it's Hashimoto's thyroiditis and prevents it from producing thyroid hormones. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that my body had a thyroid gland when this happened. But the thing with autoimmune conditions, like diabetes is an autoimmune condition, the thing with that is it will start somewhere and then it will spread. Mm-hmm. And 80% of your immune system is in your gut. So that's where the food element comes in. This has been a huge learning curve for me. I had no idea. For me, it wasn't just that I was diagnosed with secondary adrenal fatigue, mm-hmm. which made me in 2021, it made me wheelchair bound. Like I was needing to use a wheelchair. I couldn't walk without assistance. I either had a cane or someone hold me, or I'd have to hold on to something to walk. So it got very, very bad. And then to get from that to every day in the morning, I walk 5K or I run and walk 5K. Pure God's grace and, of course, nutrition. Food.
That's actually scary to think that you can go to that level of depending on, like a wheelchair, for example. But what were some of the symptoms that you saw before that led to this? Like how, like for someone that has no clue of what's going on in their body, for example, like how do they...
I talk about this a lot on social media. I've talked about this since 2017, much to the regret of my relatives who didn't want me to say, that I was this ill, and they didn't want me to put it out there. But I felt like I needed to, because after I did, honestly, so many people did get checked up, and a couple found out that they had illnesses as well. Not the same as me, but different. My condition was that I thought I was depressed. I was putting on weight and I couldn't sleep, insomnia. These were my only two symptoms. For anybody in the medical field, you'll know about TSH levels, which is how they measure your thyroid in your body. My TSH levels, standards are meant to be from 0 to 4. Mine was 72 at diagnosis. So the doctors were like, "You don't feel anything?" And I was like, "No, I don't feel it." I thought maybe it was like mild depression because I'd left all my family at home and I was in a new country. I thought maybe that's what was going on. I had no idea it was biological, physiological. So,
what would you say are there's some changes that you had to make in your lifestyle after you were diagnosed?
So it was shock to the system. You know, I also associated my illness with old age.
And okay, come on.
I didn't know, like I thought I was in my 30s. I thought this is what happens when you get old, you
30s, old age.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm way past that now. But anyway, I thought this is what happens when you get into your 30s. You get, Bharathanatyam, and you need medication for life. So I just took it on the chin, and I thought this was it. This is what happens. This is life. I didn't realize that. No.
Yeah, it's more than that. No, I'm really glad you mentioned this because we tend to do that a lot, especially when you see, like, for example, like my parents' generations, a lot of them, they kind of push aside all their, like, symptoms that they see because they're like, oh, it's just age. It's just, like, I'm just tired today. I just worked extra hard. I cooked extra hard. They'll say some excuse to put aside a visit to your, family doctor or GP, as you would say. Yeah. But it can be something way more serious than that.
Like it was for me, yeah.
Yeah. But so also, since you have a psychology background, I do want to ask this. So what impact does nutrition have on your mental health, not just physical health?
Huge.
Exactly, yeah.
I now know enough to know what to do if I am feeling a little bit down. I know what to do if, so I do a lot of cooking for postpartum mums.
Right, yes.
For people who have had surgery. I know exactly the spices to add to help them recover from that. I know what not to add to, handle those situations, whether it's children, whether it's babies, whether it's older people. I've had several instances within our family where I've had to go and help my mum, my mother-in-law, my grandma recuperate. And it's been post-surgery, post-illness. They've gone from being bedbound to walking within weeks. And honestly, it's just prayer and good food. Home-cooked food.
Another thing that I saw on your Instagram stories is that you took an Ayurvedic approach to your meal planning. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I love the whole topic of Ayurveda, and I feel like that's something we don't focus too much here. But then there's also like a specific group of people that talk about it, but I don't feel like we pay enough attention to that here. Sadly, because Ayurveda is something that's existed for ages. So can you give us a little?
I think Tamil culture itself incorporates a lot of Ayurvedic practices.
Exactly.
So we don't have to deviate too much from our heritage to go down that path. There are a few extra things that you can do depending on what your circumstances are. So I discovered Ayurveda along my journey trying to get better, I was like, no, I'm going to fight this. I have a very young child. We were a young family. And I was like, part of me, the spiritual side of me was like, oh, maybe this is God's will. Maybe, you know, I'm just going to be a young martyr and sort of like, you know, just pass, you know, that's it sort of thing. But then my faith doesn't advocate for that either. God promises you a abundant life, a joyful life, a full life. God doesn't promise you like sort of half peace or something, but you know, you're going to have a really bad ending. That's not something that God says. So I took that into sort of account, and I said, no, that's not the God that I read about in the Bible. So let's look at this. And that's when Ayurveda came handy.
So I love that you mentioned that, because that's exactly the reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast, because one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of like the very popular podcasts, for example, when they talk about nutrition, they're talking about very generic type of food plans or like food choices that we could make. But when there's a very small group of people that focus specifically on like Tamil food or South Asian food or like what spices are good for us. And I love that, like your channel, I think you have do you have a YouTube channel as well?
I do have a YouTube channel, which I don't really.
You were trying to hide that?
No, I'm not very good with technology. I'm not very disciplined, and I hate editing. So that combination's not going to get me very far on that.
Well, at least from your social media channels then, like the fact that you speak a lot about that and like kind of raise awareness and give that information for free to people who can learn so much from reading that.
I share everything that I have, all my recipes. I always tell people, you email me, I will send you a recipe, and there's no catch, there's no charge, nothing. It's just that if you put it on my socials, so if you DM me, it's going to get lost in the conversations that I have. Right. But if you email me, I will, you know, once I sit down at my laptop, which is once in a blue moon, I will actually definitely send you a recipe.
Okay, so we can transition a little bit into cooking classes that you mentioned before. So what are these cooking classes that you offer? Because now I'm curious.
So I thought when we landed in Canada, I wasn't going to register here as a psychologist because I just didn't want to do that. So I was like, you know, let me try and teach all the Vellagarans how to make paripu curry. Literally, this was my thinking.
They would love that.
I was like, I'm going to teach them how to make paripu curry, and you know, I'm going to make it. Like, you know, that was it. It was just something to do.
For those who don't know what paripu curry is, it's lentils.
Yeah,
or dal.
Dal or lentils. Yeah, I just thought, you know, I'd teach people who aren't from Tamil heritage how to make lentils.
Right.
Very, very simple. I don't have many people who are not from the South Asian community as my students.
Isn't that also surprising that it's us that are coming to learn?
Yes. It was the next generation saying, Akka, auntie, we don't know how to cook. Amma's not teaching us, or we're getting married.
We need to learn.
And it's really sweet. They're like, my fiance really loves mutton curry. Can you teach me how to make mutton curry? Can you teach me how to make biryani? And I look at them and I'm like, yeah. But can I teach you how to make vettala rasam? Or can I teach you how to make nellikattukku? Or I'll teach you how to make karupla korambu, and I'll tell them the health benefits. And then they'll come to me and they say, you know what? We have PCOS, or we have receding hairline, or we have diabetes at 20, at 21, 22. And honestly, it makes me really sad. And I'm like, okay, right. This is what you need. That you don't need mutton curry. Like, I will teach you the mutton curry, but also, can I teach you this? And that's how the cooking classes are going. That's amazing.
So there's something that I saw on your Instagram that you posted, that you said morning coffees and heavy dinners are causing your body unnecessary stress. Reading that stressed me out. Because as much as I don't want to hear this, coffee is everything for me in the morning. I need my coffee. I've tried to go cold turkey. It was horrible. It didn't have good consequences. So I don't want to hear this, but I'll ask anyway. What is it about coffee that's causing our body to stress?
It's the shock, isn't it? You're shocking your system with the caffeine and the sugar, if you do take sugar. So I tell my daughter this all the time and say, what the first thing and the last thing you put in your body, very, very important. During the day, do whatever you want, but just watch what you're doing to your body first. As I say this, the last couple of weeks, I've been really, really bad. I've been eating really bad. I've been doing everything that I probably shouldn't be doing, and I'm feeling the effects of it for sure. So you can have coffee, but if you could make it the second or third thing you put in your body,
Right.
that would be great. That would be
It's the
great.
cortisol, isn't it?
It's not the cortisol, it's the caffeine. And the effect
No,
it will
I mean
have.
the effect of the caffeine on your cortisol levels.
and your stress and your anxiety. And
Great.
if you've got any sort of mood disorders or if you're predisposed to that.
Wow. Okay. I guess I have to make some changes now. But does adding milk make a difference? What is that doing to
I
the
mean,
coffee?
depends. I find dairy in Canada very different from dairy in Europe. In Canada here, I drink A2 milk.
Okay.
And before I switched that, this is not an advert, obviously, but before I did that, I used to get a lot of hormonal spots
Okay.
that I couldn't get rid of, and I was drinking organic. You know the price of organic milk in Canada. Yeah, A2 costs a lot more than that, but definitely can see a difference in consumption, in the way it responds to your body. Honestly, Ayurveda won't prescribe dairy ever. Like unless it's ghee. Ghee is like the only thing. So you don't really need dairy, especially as an adult.
Filter coffee?
I literally live on cheese and yogurt. So
okay.
when they told me that, and they said, so I went through a 3-month gut health program with an Ayurvedic clinic in India. And when they said no dairy, no yogurt, no cheese, and they said, well, in about 2 months we'll review this. And my first question was, can I have cheese then? And they were like, no.
Oh, wow. So it's completely out. Dairy is completely out. If you want to follow the Ayurvedic.
If you want to, it was a gut health program, and it worked miracles for me. It worked miracles in that it was all scientific. It's all blood work and all of that. And the blood reports show that my TSH levels are now low enough for me to be able to lower my medication that I'm on. And eventually the plan is to come off it. So I've already stopped taking I was on very heavy steroids back in from 2017 to 2021. All of that stopped. And then now I'm working on my my thyroid medication as well. So
okay, so the other thing that you mentioned was the heavy dinner, but yeah, like the lifestyle choices in Canada do promote, eating dinner before 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. But there are a lot of, like, let's say parents, for example, who are catering to their child, and by the time they get to eat, or like if someone's working late hours and they don't eat on time, they are going to eat late. So like, what would you say are some like small changes they can make to have that, to avoid having that late dinner, like just...
Yeah, I typically have a very heavy breakfast, which is not the way you're meant to do it. You're meant to eat your biggest meal. That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When the sun is at its highest is when you're meant to have your biggest meal.
Right.
When my nutritionist at the Ayurvedic clinic told me this, I was like, there's no sun in Canada. Like, there's no sun in London. Like,
says the person that comes from London.
From London, exactly. Okay. No sun in London. Like, we get it 2 weeks of the year. Like, we don't have to worry about that. Right. But it is meant to be, lunch is meant to be your heaviest meal. But obviously, if you're working, you can't do that, right? So then I personally feel like breakfast is a good option if you can do that. Or if you're having lunch or if you're having dinner, then just the choices you make. Like, honestly, before going on this journey, I was filling myself with unnecessary amount of carbs. Not that I'm against carbs at all, but the amount of vegetables or protein ratio to carbs.
Portions, right? Yeah.
It was ridiculous. So there they've taught me a 1:2:3 method. So you have 1 portion of carbs, 2 portions of protein, lentils, whatever, and 3 portions of vegetables. I discovered that I was eating vegetables like a peasant. Like, and vegetables are so affordable, and I don't know why I was doing that.
That's very true.
And things like potatoes don't count, apparently. So.
Damn it. Wow, my whole diet's going to change after
That's what happened to me, Jenny. That's what happened to me.
This is stressing me out.
I lost 10 kilos. My skin and hair's never been better. Obviously, I can walk now, which is a huge bonus. Yes. Going from being a Bharathanatyam dancer to being in a wheelchair.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's just like heartbreaking, right?
It also affects your
your
mind.
mental health is gone. That's why I say it's God's grace. It's God's grace that I could come past that. But and also one thing I want to say is, like, I'm in my 40s. My menstrual health has never been better. My energy levels have never been better. My body is better than it was in my 20s right now. So.
There's another thing you posted that relates to the skincare. And I think you posted it as like you are what you eat, or it shows in your skin. any tips that you can give us of like types of food items that help promote better skin?
Better skin?
Yeah.
Obviously, hydrate yourself, which is something that I never do.
Yeah. You're so honest. Good job.
I try. What happened was when I was asked to have a certain amount of water, I was doing kashayam, so it's something called Gokshara kashayam. You're meant to have like 1.5 liters a day. I struggled. Plus your regular water. I struggled.
Oh my God.
I found that my body was so accustomed to not having water, not having hydration, which is like a basic need, that I just couldn't. I couldn't get past the 1 liter mark. And now I can have 3 liters, like easy, of just water. So literally just water. It's so simple.
I know, it seems so simple, but it's like just having that bottle beside you just would help. But yeah, I know, none of it. Like we don't follow that as much as we should.
We should,
yeah. Another topic that you mentioned was diabetes. And of course, South Asians were known to like have that as a more common how can I say, that's like, it's like something that's part of like, oh yeah, diabetes, like in our old age, it's gonna happen. And I've heard so many people, this really bothers me when people are like, oh, it's just in our genes. But I know there are probably ways we can avoid it, even if it's in your genes.
Absolutely. So, you know, I mentioned that I do translation work. So I went to a medical appointment once, and I was translating for a man in his late 50s, and he was like, I'm perfectly fine. And he said, which means I don't have any illnesses. And I was like translating, and he said, I only have diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure, and thyroid. That's it. Oh. I'm perfectly fine. And I literally stopped, and I was like, am I hearing him right? And it was, that is the norm. If you do not have diabetes, then that's something wrong with you. So that is the world we live in now. So yes, diabetes is not the norm.
But also, that's a huge part of, like, instead of just blaming genetics, it's our food. It comes down to that again, right? And, like, I think one of the main things is, like, breakfast, for example, is what spikes up your glucose. And then when you think about the type of breakfast South Asians have, not much of it is very helpful. In terms of, like, when you think about our, like, go-to bread, white bread, that's not going to help us.
So recently I've started doing a lot of consultations, and I found that a lot of people are asking me to come consult for their parents, actually. Okay. In terms of menu planning and nutrition and all of that. And one of the key questions that I love asking them is, which is, what did you eat when you were a child? I'm talking about talking to people in their late 60s, 70s. Yeah. And it's never bread.
Exactly.
So I say, what did you have? And they usually say, we had pair, we had idiyappam, we had puttu. And I say, eat that again.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, because I actually told a friend this recently too. She was having some, like, she felt different about the way she was feeling in terms of like weight gaining and all of that. And I'm like, sometimes sticking to your roots really helps, because that's what your body is craving. And like, it doesn't mean we need to eat like a bucket of rice, but it's the portions, but also sticking to those, the food that our generations way before ate.
You have genetic immunity. Yeah. Absolutely. So a good example of like meals, if you were having paira, or if you're having something steamed, puttu idiyappam for breakfast, and then
paira is green grams.
Paira is lentils or beans, legumes. Basically.
Legume. Okay.
Any type. Okay. Chickpeas, kala chana, right. Green mung dal, kelpie, whatever it is. Then lunch can be rice-based, it can just be curries. Back in the day, you'd have like 15 curries, and then that would cover everyone's nutritional needs, everything. Nowadays, we don't have the time to do that. So it's 2 or 3, so choose those very wisely. And then in the evenings, what I've been asked to do is have either lentil soup or vegetables, but sort of made in kind of like a hash brown or like a cutlet sort of thing, not breaded, just grilled. That warm salads, never cold salads. Yes. One thing that I keep saying to people is that, you know how they say South Asians are predisposed to diabetes and heart conditions. So if genetically, biologically, we are different, how do we then go ahead thinking that we can eat what a European or a Caucasian person's eating and not have any side effects?
Right.
So we do need to consider our biology. We do need to consider our genetics and stick to what our ancestors ate a little bit. We can't make 15 curries. That's fine. But just take what you can and you will see a huge difference.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because this is something that I've spoken about. I posted on my Instagram, and I think you saw it too, where I said, like, when it comes to salads, like, if you think salads are boring, it's because you don't know how to make good salads. And one of the reasons I say that is because when people think salads, they think a Caesar salad with like chicken with no spice in it. That's what people think a salad is. But there's so many options you can add. And one thing I've done a lot is, like, when it comes to things like kale or spinach, I'll just toss it in a pan for a little bit, make it warm, and then make a salad out of it. And I feel such a difference in my body. And that applies to like any vegetables. So we do have to always think about our body instead of just seeing what we see on like Instagram or any social media account of like another nutritionist making and assume that the same thing works for us.
Absolutely. We have to consider the environment we live in. We have to consider the climate we live in. Like, I do not follow nutritionists who do not live where I live.
Exactly.
Because my season's different. If I'm in like -20 and they're having Dej Sadam, I can't be having that as well. I have to have, and also...
You can have warm Thai sadam. I am an advocate for Thai sadam, so no.
You can. Dairy? No. Dairy and pickle?
Yeah.
No, you don't want to get me started on
bad.
this.
Oh.
No, you can't.
Here we go again.
But they do advocate for warm salads, everything to be cooked. So that's great. If you can cook it in ghee, that's even better.
Oh, I love ghee.
So
I'm all for that.
With you also have to consider what's available.
Yeah.
Seasonal vegetables, seasonal produce is the best. So I love using courgettes, as we call them, zucchini as you call them, a lot, because that's something that's locally available. Locally in Canada, I love the produce here.
Yeah,
and
good.
you can grow it in your backyard if you want to. It's locally produced. Just, you don't have to have murunga katrika portalanga. You don't have to. You can have different varieties of locally. You can have rhubarb. You can have rutabaga, you could have squash, you could have pumpkin, whatever it is, and still make South Asian curries, like Tamil food.
So now that you're a mom, I do want to switch gears to know the mindset that goes into that type of cooking, which is, so one thing I've noticed with, let's say people my age, I've seen more of them saying this, where they say, oh, I can't give my kid too much sugar because they're going to be hyper for the rest of the day. But then whenever I hear that, I'm like, I don't remember my parents saying that about me. Like, we ate sugar, but like, it was like, okay, don't eat too much because it's bad for your diet. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, she's going to be hyper. But it shows how processed foods are these days. So when it comes to your daughter, how do you make your restrictions of, because I mean, she's in school, she's seeing kids bring their, sweet snacks all the time and like eating McDonald's, for example. So how do you make your daughter understand in her terminology of what's good and bad? I feel from the look you're giving me, I'm going to get like a...
No, I'm going to tell you a story, but you can't judge me for it, okay?
Okay.
So she doesn't have any siblings, like, firstborn and all of that. And 2 years old, and we didn't give her sugar at all.
Okay.
For the first year of her life. And then I took her abroad. I'm not going to mention the country, but someone from that country decided that it was okay to give her Smarties. And
I know which country though. Go on.
And I couldn't say anything. The social context wasn't appropriate for me to say anything. So she did have Smarties. But she's 2 years old. And I stuck a chopstick in a boiled egg and I said, hey, look, it's a lollipop. And so for a very long time, she thought that boiled eggs were lollipops.
Wow.
So
brainwashing is the trick. Sorry, parents.
I have so many of these tricks up my sleeve.
Okay.
And eventually, I would do things like I would take her to McDonald's, and I love McDonald's fries back in England, not here. Here, they're not vegetarian, if you didn't know that. In England, they are vegetarian. So I would have fries. I would have my toddler in the pram with apple slices and me sitting there with my fries. But then, she's a toddler. She doesn't know what fries taste like. I just said it was adult food. Just like you wouldn't give a toddler beer or a glass of wine. Same. My burger was off limits. That was adult food. It was junk food that I liked and I was going to allow myself to have, but I'm your parent and I'm not going to allow you to have. Today, she's a lot older. I don't restrict her with anything. Okay. But then She knows food groups, which they teach her in the Canadian education system. So she knows protein, carbs, vegetables. I advocate for teaching colours. So I say, have you had enough orange this week? Have you had enough red this week? Green this week? So I don't have to say kale, spinach, cucumber, borlanga, bawaka, nothing. She knows the colour. She knows she's meant to eat it. And that's what happens. So giving the child the knowledge and empowering them to make those nutritional decisions actually makes them a better adult.
So do you include her in like the meal plan for the week kind of thing, or like the meal prep? Is she part of that?
She cooks for me.
Wow, how old is she, if you don't mind me?
She's 10, and she made dinner. Like when I go back, she's made a cannelloni bake.
Wow. So, okay, you've trained her well.
Yes, I did well.
So for a parent who's watching this that wants to get their kid, at least, even if they're not cooking an entire meal, just get involved in that process of making like meals with them. What was the trait that you saw in her that got her interest? Obviously, she has a mom like you, so obviously she
sees me in the kitchen.
It.
I think the key ingredient in this is patience. Right. It will take me half the amount of time and half the amount of effort that it does for her to make a bari curry compared to me making it, right? But the patience pays off, because when I'm sick in bed, I know that child can make rice, bari curry, mutta, and throw a salad in, do sandwich spreads. Yeah. Every day she makes her own lunch. And it's sorted, I don't have to worry. And honestly, this came because when she was 4, I was bedridden. Right. And the doctors actually gave me a definitive amount of time before which they couldn't promise whether I would live beyond that. And she would have still been very, very young. So I had a finite amount of time to make sure that my daughter knew how to feed herself. And that was what made me do what I did.
So what are some tips you can give to get her, like, get a child interested in that process of like making meals, if it isn't something as like, you never know how long I'm going to be alive for, if it isn't that?
No, there are certain things, Janani, that are absolutely basic survival, right? Yeah. Knowing how to cook, knowing how to clean, like keep your environment clean, knowing how to read and write, like literacy. Yes. So I'll start with that. I'm an avid reader, so when she was, before she was born, I was reading to her. As soon as she came out, I was reading to her. I would read to her, and, she's a baby. She doesn't know. I would skip pages. I would skip paragraphs and pretend that the book was over before it was done. But it also got her to reading early, and she became literate. Step number 1, because I need to know how to read ingredients, and I need to know how to... When we go to the store and she says, can I have Doritos? I say, okay, read the ingredients. She'll read it. She'll read E numbers. She'll say, no, thank you, Mummy.
Wow. Okay.
I just mentioned a brand, but it's fine. Like whatever it is.
That's amazing.
So start with the basics. Just, we are raising adults. We're not raising children. Right. So start with teaching them how to read. Yeah. Teaching them how to take ownership of their bodies, and then obviously you have to welcome them in the kitchen. You have to welcome the mess that they make as well. Yeah. Another thing that I know, I'm going to mention this, is you have to try not to force feed them.
Oh, wow. Okay, we just opened a can of worms. I have to get into this now. How do you know, as a mom, you want to see your child eat a full plate and then you feel satisfied as a mom and you're like, they're full, they're good to go. But when do you know that, like, how did you identify that boundary of like, if she doesn't feel like eating, I'm not going to force her, but you still have that sense of guilt in you to be like, I haven't fed my child?
I had a very unhealthy relationship with food as a child. I was force-fed as a child. I was, one of the things that I was called was Miss Bones. Obviously, you wouldn't think it now, but that's what I was called back then. So I was determined not to do the same to my child. And then God presented me with a 6-month-old, when you start baby weaning, who wouldn't open her mouth for anything. So I would take her, literally, Vida, and say, can you please feed my child? Can you please feed my child? Because that's how bad it was. And honestly, that was my learning process. I looked at, and we're in England, and I looked at my child, and I looked at European children, and I was like, they are not taking their children out and saying, they're not doing that. They're sitting, the children are eating, they have such healthy relationships. So I started looking at that. And what I found was the more autonomy I gave, the more decision-making power I gave her, even though she was 1 year old, 2 years old, the more healthy her relationship became with food, the more she trusted that I would listen to her if she said, no, mummy, that's enough. And this is before she could communicate. So we would say to her, I'd say, poduma, and she would just say, podum. Oh, and that was the gesture that she would use. So she didn't know what it meant, but she knew if she did this, I would stop offering her food. So yeah, that's just trusting your children. And the other thing that I would repeat to myself as a parent is children never starve. Children will never starve. Children will never starve. It's against their biology to starve themselves. Very true. Obviously, as an amma, you don't think of all of that. And it's hard. I've cried myself to sleep. I've said, how do I eat when my child hasn't eaten for 3 days? She's gone on like 3-4 days when she's been teething and stuff without anything but just fruits and milk and water. But I'm like, it's fine. As long as she's hydrated, which is a key element, it's fine. She'll be fine. And today, it's just a completely different story. She loves trying food. She has such a healthy relationship with food. And it's really a joy to watch.
I feel like I can listen to you for hours because you have so much knowledge to offer. But I know for people who are listening and watching, well, they can find you on Instagram if they want more tips.
Find me on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok.
What's your handle again? Tamil_food, right?
Tamil_food on Instagram and Facebook.
And just TikTok. To also wrap up the episode, are you still offering cooking classes?
I am.
Okay, so where can people
So you can just DM me, you can email tamilfoodclasses@gmail.com. Just send me a DM on any platform. I do group classes, individual classes, consultations, kids, whatever. I just want people to learn how to cook so they don't have to suffer like me.
No, that's really incredible what you're doing. And I would have to say thank you for coming to Toronto and living here now because we're all benefiting from it. Even though we can find you on social media, it's nice to have you in person here. And like the fact that you're offering cooking classes to the next generation of learners.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
We're moving back to England.
Oh my gosh. This is the best way to end the episode. No, are you really?
Yes, it's exclusive.
So I caught you at the right moment?
On Janani Bhaskaran's podcast.
Great. Oh no.
Yeah, we're moving back.
Are you still going to be offering tips, courses, recipes online?
Absolutely. I will still be Tamil Food. I think I'll always be Tamil Food. And Tamil Food Junior, as she's known, has for years now been planning a takeover of the Tamil Food empire. I don't know what she thinks I do. But so I think Tamil Food will definitely be here for a long time, so there's no worry. But you have me for roughly about 12 months if you want to avail local classes. After that, you're going to have to fly to England, unfortunately.
All right, so save yourself a flight ticket and book those cooking classes in the next 12 months, as long as Rajini's here. Thank you. Honestly, I'm so grateful for this episode because I feel like I learned so much, and so many people have messaged me to have guests who can talk about parenting. And this episode, I think, will help them a lot. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here. And yeah, it's really nice having you.
Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow on Spotify. Till next time.